So Doug, your pronouns?
Just male, whatever those are.
Okay, perfect. And your official title at Homes
It
Now.
is chairman.
Okay, so just like being some background on Homes Now. How long has Homes Now been around, and like what services do you provide for Bellingham's community, like pre-COVID and also during COVID times?
Oh, okay. Homes Now started in June of 2017. I am one of the original co-founders. We started off we noticed that after the last presidential elections, that was very disappointing, and we're like, hey, well, we need to do something ourselves, and so let's focus on a policy area that we think we can work with, and we felt like homelessness was a big issue in Bellingham, and we wanted to make a dent in the issue directly. And so, from the start, we wanted to do tiny homes, but it turns out that the Bellingham Municipal Code at the time did not allow for that, and did not allow for it to be used for temporary emergency shelters, or a temporary homeless shelter, which is basically what its official designation is. But anyway, what got us on the map was that in December of 2017, we did a sleep out on City Hall where we
I remember Al telling me about this.
yeah, and so we basically, me and Jim Peterson, the other co-founder, he's no longer with Homes Now, but
Mhm.
we just set up our two tents there one night, and then because we wanted to, and people said they were going to come set up their tents, but it turned out to be, since it's December, turned out to be like really rainy and gross, and so only us two went, but then after a while, people started walking by. A lot of people that are homeless started walking by and saying, "Hey, I've got a tent. Can I camp out here too?" And then eventually, after like 3 days, we had like 50 tents, and that thing lasted for 18 days, and and the first ordinance that was passed in the beginning of the new year of 2018 was an ordinance that allowed for um, temporary encampments here, under all these specific rules that they have now. So like we kind of had almost an unregulated encampment, and it was okay. But of course, after we did that, the city came up with new rules that allowed us to do more than what was available in the past, but at the same time put more restrictions in some ways. So for example, we used to not be able to do it at all unless we were a religious institution. So the first time we talked with the city, they were saying, you need to find a church. We'll approve the permit, but you need to find a church. And we're like, why can't we do this? Because we're not religious. And so that was just the way that the law was written, though. That's how it was in paper. So I get it why they had to enforce that, but at the same time, it was dumb. And so after a while, though, it got changed, and now nonprofits can do that work as well. And so Homes Now, what ended up happening was pretty much like a year of not much in 2018, other than we did the shower truck, and and normally since the beginning, and still we do outreach during the winter, which is where we go out and get supplies to people that are literally on the street. And then we also do the homeless summits, are like where we go to the park, or we go to a public location and give out gear and supplies and food and stuff like that. And so that's on the more minor side of what we do. But anyway, that was 2018, and we at the end of 2018, we were really trying to push for getting our own encampment going, because we wanted to do tiny homes. They said tiny homes aren't allowed yet. And so we were like, okay, but the city said we could do tents, and so we were like, okay, we'll do tents. And the reason why I think they ended up working with us in the first place is because Jim got up there at a city council meeting and said that he promised them that we would camp out on their lawn again unless they gave us a spot. And so they did give us a spot, and it was pretty much the next day that we got the call from planning director, Rick Seppler, and he told us that the mayor has decided to grant our request. So that was Winter Haven. Winter Haven was the first encampment, and this was in very early 2019. So,
and that was behind City Hall, right?
That was the one behind City Hall. Now, when it comes to tents, the longest you can stay in one spot was 90 days. And so we were there for 90 days, and then we moved to the Whatcom location by where the 911 dispatch center is, where nearby Trader Joe's, and that was called Safe Haven. And that was for a little bit longer. And then, because I think you can get 90 days with a 90-day extension, and that's it. And so now, and what we did before we moved to where we're at now in Fairhaven is we went all tiny homes. So nobody's in tents anymore. Everyone's in tiny homes that live at Unity Village, and it provides emergency housing for people that are, where they're perfectly fit for the same housing that you or I enjoy, but at the same time, income level is really low, or things that, or they're on a waiting list.
Like other situations.
Yeah, because there's actually a real lack of housing. So sometimes one of the problems, or one of the main things we have to do on a daily basis is to change narratives, or change the perception of homelessness, right? So some people think that it's a problem with the individuals in general. Sometimes people think that, like I do, that it's environmental, as in there isn't enough units that are affordable for people, and as they become more expensive, you'll gradually see more people become homeless, and it's a technical problem, not a personal problem, right? And so because a lot of times people, will misjudge, so they'll think that just because they're homeless, they are automatically a fuck up, or just because they're homeless, they are automatically a drug addict, and that's not true. And we also went with a self-governing model for the village. So the village mostly runs itself. So the residents, we formed the rules with the residents. Of course, there's rules we have to follow from the city, and those are non-negotiable. But within that frame, there's a lot of rules that we do have the ability to set up. And I'm not saying that I like lots of rules or lots of restrictions or anything like that. But when you have 20 people living together, you have to come up with like a common ground set of standards that you can agree to. So rather than...
Yeah, it's like having roommates.
Yeah, exactly. I say that to them. Sometimes little stuff comes up, nothing major, but I have to say that often, like, look, this is the type of stuff you run into when you have 17 roommates. Like, it would happen to anybody. Yeah, it would happen to anybody. It's normal. But the rules are such that everyone has to get along. So they formed these rules. We formed those rules with them. So we as the leadership of Homes Now are not actually like saying, here's all the rules you have to follow, and kind of dictating it. Because when that occurred previously, it didn't work, and people wouldn't do their jobs, and it was just people were more depressed. And so when you have a stake in it and you can help form the policies and form the village, then you want to get involved more, right? If you're a resident. And so
is Safe Havens? Oh, sorry. Continue. You can continue.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Safe Haven. You were saying, is Safe Haven still around?
Is that still open?
No. Because it's been the one camp basically that's moved, and with this one we're allowed to stay longer. Now, we were supposed to get out of the current site we're at now in April 30th. This upcoming April 30th, but because of the COVID thing, we got a new permit that says that we're there 90 days after the emergency has ended, and then we might get a renewal on top of that. So just to put that in perspective, the ordinance that was passed only allows for 2 years at one spot, and usually you get 1 year and then a 1 year extension for a total of 2 years. So in August of 2021, that will be 2 years. The 2 years allowed by the ordinance. Now, and then we'll have to move somewhere else. Because that's how the law works with that. I would like to see it expanded to maybe 3 years or something. But the main thing we run into is like when like we've gone to different like neighborhoods, right? So at first the neighborhood is apprehensive. They think, as I was saying about the narratives around homelessness, they think things aren't true about what's going on. And so what happens is that at first they're trying to resist it, but then once we're in there, they're like, oh, this isn't what I thought. And they end up being supporters. So we've had multiple people that come and visit Unity Village and said, I was against this, but now I'm for it because I see how it works, right? And so...
Yeah.
And so our goal, HomesNOW's goal is to end homelessness one person at a time. So we're really against the idea of putting everyone in a box that you treat them all, because everybody has different problems, right? So if you treat everyone like they're a drug addict, then you're going to get dysfunction. If you treat everyone like they have mental health issues, then you're going to have dysfunction. If you treat everyone like they're a criminal, then you're going to get dysfunction, right? And so,
yeah.
So one thing we really believe in is treating everyone as equals, and so so we try to foster an environment where any of the residents can talk to on the same level as any of the board members, and we make decisions together, and that builds trust and makes the policies better, because they run, they live there. I don't, right? So they know more than I do about how to run their own home. So we just provide support. So we make sure that everyone has the supplies they need. We make sure that the lights stay on. We make sure that that the community can see Unity Village and see how it works. And something to keep in mind too is that HomesNOW has no paid staff. So we're on a shoestring budget at all times, but since 100% of the money is going toward the goal, we are able to cover our costs, even though donations are less because of the virus thing. But
And was there always no paid staff, or?
Yeah, we've never had paid staff.
All volunteers.
Yeah, it's always been volunteer, and we also don't take any taxpayer dollars. So while we have taken services from like the government, for example, like if they have a water hookup, or if they have to build a terminal for our electrical or something, like we've gone that far, but we're not taking any government money either. So and so, yeah, we survive off of private donations, and yeah.
Okay, and how has it been working during COVID?
It's been working really well, actually. It's been working, I would say, better, because basically the orders were basically that everyone has to stay at home, right? So a lot of our volunteers have had to stay at home. A lot of us have stayed at home. And that has provided an opportunity for the village to run itself more so than having volunteers hovering over them all the time, right? So I'm not against the volunteers. It's great to have them. But what I'm saying is, like,
they get their home to themselves.
Yeah,
it's more homey.
Yeah, exactly. And what we've done is we changed a few procedures. So, for example, we're now required to not let any unessential people in the gate. That's because of COVID. And we still take donations, but we put a table outside the gate, and if someone wants to visit us, we can talk through the gate. And we've also had to do like more sanitizing of stuff, and like 3 times a day rather than 1 time a day. And then when people use the kitchen, they have to use gloves and stuff like that. And our on-site manager and mayor, we call them the mayor, Tina Hayes, a resident, she is very strict about that. So I'm even a little more loose on it. So I'm glad she's been keeping the procedures really strict on that. And nobody's gotten sick. So that's another good thing, too.
Awesome, actually.
Yeah. And everything's doing pretty good, though.
So just talking about, like, Unity Village, what are, like, the resources it has for people in it?
Well, what we do is we we provide housing, emergency housing. So each unit is
they're like tiny houses.
Yeah, each unit is 8 by 10 on the inside, and they have full heat and full electrical and insulation and all that. And so they're just like the inside of a small bedroom.
How many people can fit into one?
One. I mean, we do allow for couples, but it's a little bit of a tight squeeze. And in the past, we found that couples have a hard time because it's just a little too small. But we wouldn't say no to a couple if they would be great residents and they could stand being in that close of proximity with each other.
So there's no families?
There's no families. And mostly it's adults that are single. But we do allow for couples, though, and we do allow for pets. And also, we make sure that we have supplies of, because like everyone has their own services too. So like if people have like food stamps or something, they'll use their own food stamps, or if they go, or we have volunteers that will go to the food bank and drop stuff off too, or we'll have 3 residents go and get stuff from the food bank and bring it back. And so what I'm saying is that we also provide, as HomesNOW, we also provide community food too. So like the stuff you can't get at the food bank, if the stuff, when your food card runs out, hey, let's get some groceries. What do you guys want? We'll get it.
You guys do that during COVID as well?
Yeah, we do. And every Sunday I cook a community meal from scratch, and then then other people too make meals too. It's not just me, but at different days of the week or more randomly, but I do it every Sunday. Also the water down there is kind of chemically because it's right next to the sewer treatment plant, so we also provide fresh water that is not right from the tap for drinking water. And then we don't have sewer, but we do have a gray water container that we empty twice a week, and it basically is where the water goes. Now, we used to have buckets to like dump the gray water, but then we just got some bilge pumps, and the water automatically pumps to the tank now. But we do have to empty it every once in a while, and so. Then there's also porta potties, which that's actually half our monthly costs, is having 6 porta potties, and that because we don't have sewer, right? So that's that's basically the biggest sacrifice, is that you got to use a porta potty instead of a real toilet.
So there's a kitchen as well.
Yeah, it's a shared kitchen tent, and as well as a dining tent, which is kind of like the social tent. And then we are upgrading our kitchen tent right now to a bigger one because it was a little small. And at the same time, the other services that we provide are that we have, we have volunteer social workers that come in and help residents find services if they need services. And what else? And yeah, that's about it. We kind of provide the service of the housing, and then the material, supplies, and utilities needed to support that infrastructure.
That's awesome. So how many people so 20 people live there now? Or can it hold 20?
It can hold 20. Right now we have 18 people that live there. And
then how many visitors do you generally get on, like pre-COVID?
Well, pre-COVID, we'd probably get at least 5 to 10 a day. So people would come down pretty often.
And for the patrons living there, they're still going out into the community? Are they doing like grocery shopping for themselves and then coming back and bringing that type of thing? Is that how it works generally? Okay.
Yeah, and also we'll help too with that. Like, so if someone needs something and they can't afford it, oftentimes we'll just get it and make sure that people have what they need. And at a basic level.
Awesome.
And that's not very expensive compared to staff, right? So because imagine, our whole budget for all of 2019 was something like $150,000 total to build all the tiny homes and everything else. And so basically, imagine if we had paid staff, though, that 150,000 would go pretty quick. It might, if you had like 3 people that made 30,000 a year or something, that would be a lot, right? And so,
that would be it.
So I mean, like, that's kind of like, if we didn't use the model that we're using, we wouldn't be able to like do anything, period. So I'm really glad that we went with the model we did, and it works even better during a crisis like this, where where things are different, where the rules are different than what they normally are, right? So.
Are you seeing like an uptick of like people who can't afford basic means at all?
Yeah. I think long run, over time, I think we see more of that. And if you look at the statistics of the point in time count and stuff, it's showing an uptick as well. So not only does it feel like it, but it seems the statistics indicate that there is a rise in homelessness gradually over time. And I think that the reason's pretty obvious, and it's mostly economic. It's mostly... if you have benefits, they've been flat for decades. If you have a job, it's paying flat for decades, or a decade or two. And meanwhile, rent and cost of living in every area just goes up and up and up and up and up. And so people that used to be able to afford that $300 a month room can't afford a $600 a month room. You know, people that used to be able to afford $600 a month apartment can't afford a $1,200 a month apartment. And so then, you know, there's low income housing developments, but oftentimes if you're on Section 8, it's kind of like a lottery system, and which is dumb. And if you're at the more local level, you're usually on a housing list, and you might be on that list for years and never get your housing. And so part of the reason why we use this model is because it's so cheap to set up. It costs so little. Each tiny home is around $4,000 to build, and it's built with volunteer labor. Usually we have tons of construction people that just want to help and can get this stuff done fast. And the only issue we've had that really stops us at almost every turn is land. So a land where somebody says, sure, you can do this on my land, or a government agency saying, sure, you can do this on government land. And so because buying the land outright, or even a down payment with a monthly payment on the land, plus having to develop all the infrastructure on the land, gets pretty damn expensive pretty quick. But that's true. But at the same time, there's vacant lots everywhere that are owned by somebody, or owned by the government, or owned by whoever, and it's not being used for anything. And it could be used for something good like this, right? And so that's why we've ended up working with the city. That's why we are probably going to end up working with the county next, is because the government agencies, or the governments, local governments, have been like, yeah, you can use this square of land for what you're trying to do, because they have the mandate to look after the public good or whatever. Whereas a private business doesn't necessarily have that mandate. So
are you seeing like how do people I would assume some of them do have jobs inside the tent encampment. Are you seeing any unemployment within the tent encampment, leading to like more costs from HomesNOW?
Well, no, HomesNOW hasn't seen much in the way of increased costs, but we have seen that we used to have about 30% of our residents employed, and right after the COVID thing started, a lot of our residents got laid off from their work. And so, yeah, I would say that unemployment is definitely going up, and at least in the small case study we have inside Unity Village, I can confirm that as well. If we look at the national numbers of 22 million unemployed, as of last week, we'll find out more tomorrow or the day after. Maybe it's another 6 million this week. You know, that's kind of unprecedented. You know, the number that before the COVID started, the previous record was in 1982, and it was 650,000 people. And then the other record that came close to that was during the last recession, and it was around 620,000. Okay, and so we've seen 3 weeks in a row where it's been more than 5 million. So we had 7 million the first week, 7 million the second week, and then like 5 million the third week. So that's a lot, and I don't think that the economy is just going to come snapping back if they reopen everything. You're going to have where already small businesses have gone out of business, or that a lot of businesses won't hire back as many workers because business will stay kind of slower. It's not just going to come back booming because. Also, too,
it's scary.
Just because you're not going to get kicked out for not paying your rent you'll still owe it at the end. They'll still say you owe us 4 months worth of rent, and people won't be able to pay that. And it's just like I just don't see it being very good. But there's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity to make a difference when people feel that, and it's a lot of people, but it still sucks because we should be able to do more to prevent people from getting hurt, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Instead of being like reactive, just being proactive.
And it doesn't necessarily take having a master plan or anything. You just have to make sure that you're always making progress, and there's always things to improve. And as long as you keep chipping away at it and keep saying, yes, I want to improve this, then eventually over the long run it does happen. And so if local governments or businesses want to make progress on something, if they really wanted that, they can get it, right? But if it's not even a goal, or you think everything's just fine as is, then nothing's going to change, right? So
Okay, so coming back to Homes Now, how has, like, the villagers and everything been responding to this? Like, what procedures are now in place that is supposed to keep them safe? I know you said about gloves in the kitchen. Is there any more?
Well, we have a unit that we use for quarantining, and so we're talking about quarantining items. So when people bring items, they might be contaminated with the virus. They're probably not, but hey, let's just assume they are for being safe.
Better safe than sorry.
And so we make sure to sanitize all that down, and we usually leave it in the quarantine unit for a few days, so that whatever's in there will, because after a few days it'll die if it doesn't have an active host. And so then we also have a quarantine porta potty. So like if someone got sick and they had nowhere to go, if someone does get sick, we usually play it safe and get them a hotel room for a couple days to make sure that it doesn't get worse, and then they'll get a test from their doctor or something. We've had that happen one time, but yeah, he turned out not to be sick, and it was because they took one of our residents works at Walmart, and they took his temperature before he went into work, and he had a low-grade fever of like 99 point something, and so he didn't feel sick or anything, and we put him up in a hotel room for a few days, but it turned out he didn't get sick, and it was overblown. But at the same time, better safe than sorry. We also have a policy where if someone did have to stay at the village, but they were infected with COVID, they wouldn't be able to leave their tiny home except to go to the bathroom, which would be the quarantine porta potty unit that we've designated. And food and stuff would be brought to them rather than them going to the kitchen and touching everything and stuff. And so it's not perfect, but that would be what we'd have to do if we were against the wall on that one. And, there's a lot of people that get COVID and they don't get that sick. But I guess the big thing about it is how fast it can transmit. So, and that's the other nice thing too is about the tiny homes is they are naturally conducive to self-quarantining, because if you have something like a traditional shelter, you might all be in one room, and that spreads that stuff around a lot faster than if each one of you has your own unit, right?
Yeah. Awesome. So, have you visited the Unity Village since this shutdown?
Yeah, I'm pretty much the only staff member that is able to go there, and I'm there. I go there every day, and
awesome.
I just make sure they have what they need, and I guess I'm the only one that's allowed inside the gate that's a staff member, and so. And that's in our new permit. It says that in our permit. So that until the virus emergency is over. And so Yeah, and it's been working pretty well. Everyone's in good spirits, and the village runs itself basically. I don't know what we'd do if we didn't go with a self-governing model. We'd be up the creek without a paddle, probably.
So with the self-governing model, how does that work? Is it kind of like a democracy where everyone like comes in and helps join?
Yeah, kind of. It's not like we literally do votes, but we but we try to do consensus. So we try to get everyone to be happy with it. Let's find a solution that all of us can be happy with, and if something pops up, I encourage residents to work it out between themselves and stuff like that. You guys work it out between yourselves, but hey, if you can't, then we'll have to come in, but I hope not. And then they've mostly been able to handle everything themselves. And so we make sure that they have the supplies they need, though. So, like, for example, if you need cleaning supplies and we're not getting cleaning supplies, then it's going to be hard to clean, right? But at the same time, there's a lot of different models. There's a lot of different ways to do this. But, a lot of organizations have paid staff. And if you have paid staff, you can kind of throw a lot of money at the problem and make sure that you have a staff member or 2 staff members or 3 staff members working at all times. But if you don't have those kind of resources and you're trying to achieve something that will work, but will also make people happier, then having people run their own lives is better than someone running your life for you. And it's better for people finding permanent housing too, because when you get your housing, when you get your apartment, you're going to have to take care of yourself. Nobody's going to be your babysitter. So you need to make sure that you can take care of yourself, and that means that you'll be more successful at getting housing. Whereas I think that in some models, and I'm not going to name any names or anything, but I think some models kind of nurture dependency, making it so that you become dependent on them, or it's such that you don't have any like agency to do what you want, and everyone's just telling you what to do, and that ends up being pretty depressing. And then people don't contribute because they're just trying to do the minimum to get by, and so
it's more of like a collective society inside of the Unity.
Yeah, yeah. But it's consensus based. So while we don't do direct voting, we're like, hey, everybody, what can we do here that everyone can live with? And we've been pretty successful with that. And the residents too. We've encouraged the residents to have their own meetings without the board member or staff present. You guys have your own meetings. Plan out how you want to run this, and we'll sign off on it. And
so how is it looking during this quarantine time when everyone's supposed to kind of be like self-isolated? Is it like that inside, or is it a little more like we're all in this together kind of thing?
It's more like we're all in this together, and we follow the social distancing of like 6 feet apart or whatever you have at the grocery store, that level apart. But yeah, it's mostly we're all in this together, and I think it's actually brought the residents closer together too. We're having a fun time. Basically, it's been good.
That's awesome.
And also too, the quarantining thing is we're in a good spot for quarantining because we're right near the sewer treatment plant with the train tracks, and it's an industrial area, so there's not actually a lot of foot traffic really coming through there. So it ends up being where the village is kind of quarantined, but like the people inside aren't necessarily quarantined from each other, but we are distant from each other, so we're not like having close contact and stuff as much.
Yeah, that's good. So you say everyone's like in good spirits. People are like just like continue with their days type of thing.
Yeah.
Does it feel like normal in there?
Yeah, it feels like normal, and in fact, I'd say it's a little better because they've come together as more of like a little family, right? And so yeah, and it's been running good. The way that I see it too is like this virus thing. I think it's going to have some big effects on the economy in a negative way. I think that it's pretty smooth because I think that anyone who's living at Unity Village has already been there. You know, some people are going to be experiencing that pain for the first time of maybe losing their place, or maybe facing the possibility that they could become homeless when they thought they never could become homeless. And so people that have already been there, they're just ahead of the curve, and that's how I see it.
Resilient already.
Yep. And, you know, they know how to survive.
So just kind of like getting your opinion on this, because you work very directly with people who are displaced. What factors within like the village or within like general displacement make your villagers or homeless people in general more susceptible to like infection of this COVID disease? And how does that affect like Bellingham's homeless population, like overall and maybe in the long run?
I think that there's a couple factors that would make infection more likely. If you are homeless and you're at a shelter where you're like the drop-in center or something like that, you're all kind of in a room and you're all kind of too close together, and you might be like sharing a cigarette and stuff like that, stuff to that effect, and it's just a lot easier to spread. The other thing too would be nutrition, I think. Like, so if you're on the street, you're not necessarily getting the best food that's healthiest for you, and so you're in an environment where you might spread it more easily, and B, you are weakening your immune system by not having the best foods, and C, you know, you might be out in the elements, which causes the same problem as reduced immunity, and you might not be able to focus on sanitation as much because you don't have the money to buy Lysol wipes and hand sanitizer and stuff like that. And it might be provided for you, but it might not be provided for you. And so I'd say it's like a death by 1,000 cuts thing, like where a bunch of factors just add up to a result that leads to more people getting infected. And also medical care, because in the United States, you know, you might not have the medical care that you need if you're at that level either, and so people might avoid going in, which is another factor as well. So yeah, I just describe it as it all adds up, right?
Adds up. I like that. Let's see. So, what do you think like Bellingham community needs to do to better serve its homeless population during this time?
I would suggest that people find I think there's a lot that can be done to help. I think that anybody that's been, you know, like it's already kind of happening, but I would like to see more of it. There needs to be some more spots to set up some emergency encampments, and maybe start with tents, upgrade to tiny homes. There needs to be more services available to people, easy to get, not as much where you have to go through a bunch of steps to get it. So governments could take more risks. I think taking a few more risks to help, because a lot of times the local governments are really like risk averse and liability based thinking, and so anything that you try that's new like this, or that's unusual, it might actually be a risk. But is it worth it to do it or not? And so the fear of something bad that might happen might be worth it in the end, because the overall result might be good. Local businesses too, they can help by donating to organizations that are helping. They can also help directly with donations of goods and services and stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot that can be done. It's just about doing it.
Yeah, because like 1 in 3 people didn't pay rent this last month, and yeah, I could just totally see how it just all snowball into like.
And it could just explode, yeah. And so my idea or my thoughts on it is, let's get ahead of the curve now. Let's start building now, so that when that happens, we'll have a lot of places for people to stay, instead of like, oh yeah. And I'm not saying we're gonna do all of it, but like, you know,
there needs to be more.
Because like if you're talking about an official number of homeless in Bellingham being like 800 people or 1,000 people, you know, we're helping 20 people, but that number is a reasonable number that you could just find a bunch of sites and tick off all of them and get everyone housed in emergency housing that's at good standards. Because that's how I would describe this: is emergency housing. Like, you don't treat people like they're fuck ups. You just you basically provide the basics of what people need to live in a stable environment, and then from there they're able to take care of themselves pretty easily. Like, if you're like, because when you're homeless, you're in survival mode. So it's really hard to get your shit together and get a job or get services you need to apply online and all that when you don't have a computer, when you don't have food, when you don't have when you look dirty. So like, no one's going to give you that job when you don't look nice for the interview. And then so if you're worried about food and stuff, you're not going to be worried about that other stuff that might get you back into normal housing. And so so this emergency housing provides a foundation so that from there they're stable and they can get their lives back together. And the cost is it's also the cheapest model. So the way we do it is literally the cheapest way to do it. And you just provide the things that people need. They have a place to live. If they want to upgrade, they can upgrade and get their apartment. We don't have any set time limits either. So while we do encourage residents to find their permanent housing, and of course they all do want full housing, but we're not going to say, hey, you're on a 2-year time limit, or hey, you're on a 6-month time limit. And because if I was in that position, I'd be feeling the clock ticking as soon as someone says that to me, to the point where you wouldn't be able to fully relax and stuff. And so,
yeah.
And so,
do you see? Sorry. Oh wait, no, sorry. No. Do you see like a Zoom is so weird? It's just like
it's always like this with every meeting.
I'm just like, So with homelessness on like. There's been a housing crisis. We've known that forever, since like the recession. And do you predict that maybe there's gonna be like a huge flux of like Bellingham people becoming homeless and needing these resources, but there being a lack of resources, especially with the requirements that a lot of places do have? Because I know like the YWCA only takes women. Yeah. And so does maybe Lydia's place, and takes the women and family. And so like there's a huge population of men and also young kids that are being displaced.
And I predict that we'll see a lot more of that. I really do. I might be wrong on that. Maybe it'll all just bounce back really quick, but I do think that you're going to gradually see, as soon as they say the virus thing is over and everything gets lifted, people are still going to be way behind, and they're not going to get their job back, and their unemployment's going to run out, and eventually you're just going to get people kicked out on the street with a whole bunch of empty units. I mean, that's what I see happening. I know it doesn't make sense. I know that it's not right, but that's what I think will happen. And so we're trying to directly help. And again, our model is very open as far as who can get in there. We do an interview process, and we do a background check and everything. But just because someone has a criminal history doesn't mean they're disqualified from housing. It just depends on like whether it's resolved or whether it's still an ongoing thing. So for example, if we look at somebody's record and they have all kinds of stuff from like last year, it's like, okay, that might be at high risk. But if you look at somebody's record and it's like, oh, that was in 2009, but there's nothing since, then it's like, oh, okay. But in any case though, we have a process where people are vetted before they come in. It's not just someone is able to get right in, but we have about 500 people that have applied on our website to get in, and it's kind of sad because we want to do more, but it's like you got so many people that you want to help, but there's just so many names, and I think you'll see a lot more names on there too as time goes on, right? And so, and sorry, I said 500, I meant 300. We have 356, I believe. So I misspoke on that one.
That's a lot still. Do you know of any other like alternatives to housing that people in Bellingham have been doing during this pandemic?
Well, alternatives. I would say that there's people that are camping out in the woods. There's people that are they get maybe. I know that the city is doing a COVID motel kind of thing where if you have COVID, you can stay at a quarantine motel. I know that. I mean, I don't
know how you'd go about obtaining that.
I don't know. I feel more comfortable getting the actual housing going rather than like looking for other housing because it seems like it's hard to find housing in general. So yeah, and I'm lucky because I moved here in 2006 and I'm paying the same rent that I paid in 2006 and
rent control.
No, it's because I pay the mortgage payment on the house, but I don't own it. And so it ends up being mutually beneficial. And so that payment hasn't changed since 2006. But yeah, but it's a 3-bedroom house. But what I'm saying is that amount of money that I pay for my 3-bedroom house would get me a studio apartment now. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it's like ridiculous.
So you're saying that there's like a whole vetting process of who gets into the village.
Yeah, what we do, that process, the way that process works is we put out, so people apply on our website to get in. When we do interviews, we send text messages and emails to everyone that has applied. And we say, hey, we're doing interviews in the next 3 weeks or something. Here's the dates and times, 3 days in a row. You can show up to one of them. And then what we do is we have the residents that currently live at Unity Village do the interviews. And I'm there as well. I'm in the room. And there's a rule that you can't interview someone you know as well. So if someone's like their friend or something, they can't interview them. Someone else has to interview him. And so, anyway, after the residents interview potential new residents, they put down their like top 3 or 4 picks, and then we go through that and we kind of do a meet and greet where that individual will meet and speak with some of the residents in a more casual setting. And that, like where we might share a meal or something, and then you basically have like an informal hangout time, and then from there it kind of clicks or it doesn't click, and then that's kind of our selection process.
Okay. And then how does the self-governing, like how did that be appointed? Like how you become mayor? Was it Jess? What was her name? Jess?
Yeah. Okay, so the story with that is it used to be run a little bit differently before October, and I don't know if you know, you probably already know about the former president and the embezzlement thing, right? Yeah. And so after that, and I wasn't involved a lot. I was the original co-founder, but I wasn't down there every day like some people were. And so I wasn't really aware of a lot of stuff of how it was being run. And I'm not saying that, and I'm saying it was still okay, but like it's a lot better. I think it's a lot better now. But there was a little bit more of a top-down management style where the president and vice president and then key volunteers would kind of be more in charge, and so they would kind of like instruct the residents or tell the residents or yell at the residents what to do, and it wasn't and after October, when we switched over, here comes this new guy, like, me. And, am I going to go in there and start telling them all what to do? That would be a disaster. So the only way that it was able to move forward is, hey, you guys can run your own village and I'll help you run your own village. And that ends up with where you gain respect and you gain credibility because you're not some new person, some new outside person coming in suddenly just ordering everybody what to do. And nobody likes that anyway. I don't like that. If I was in the same position, I wouldn't want to be treated like that. And so so that was the only thing that I thought would work. And also transparency, because after the embezzlement thing, it's kind of hard to trust an organization if that had happened. And so that part of the reason why I was kind of dramatic when it did happen is because I just made a public statement. Here's what happened. It is what it is, and we're being totally transparent here, and one person's actions don't reflect on the organization as a whole. And this is what led to that problem occurring. This is what will fix it, and we're implementing these reforms to fix it. And so that approach, I think, worked pretty well. So on the one hand, you had at the organizational level, how are you going to get donors and other people to trust your organization again? How are you going to get the city to keep working with your organization? And then on the other side, how do you make the residents happy? How do you make the environment non-dysfunctional? How do you do that? And how do you do it with no paid staff? And that was our strategy, what we came up with. And I think that it was a good strategy.
So what keeps you and your organization at HomesNOW motivated during this pandemic when everything seems to stop and you can't really have people really get up on their feet just because there's so many outside factors that are inhibiting that? What keeps you guys motivated?
I would say progress keeps us motivated. So we have our main idea is that we're always trying to make progress. Yes, we realize stuff has slowed down since COVID, and it's even slowed down for us too. But the idea is don't just stagnate. Don't just sit there. We got to do something. And and what keeps us motivated is when when the residents are involved as volunteers too, and we're trying to make the problem better. Now, we're not solving every problem, but what we're talking about next is we need to set up a second village so we can help more people. The residents themselves were helped by this program, so they want to get involved to help others as well. And so we've talked with businesses. We have a local business, Tidal Vision, that has agreed to let us use one of their warehouses from June to September. And so we're going to use their warehouse to build more tiny homes. And then while we're doing that, we're going to try to fundraise and work with maybe the county to find a spot to put them on so that we can set up a second village. And, some of our current residents might end up being the leaders of another village since because what's important is that now that everyone gets along and everything's running smoothly, it kind of sets the tone. It sets the tone for anyone new coming in to be legit or good, right? And so so if we set up a second village, there would probably be a few residents that would go to that and set up that village, and they would be setting the tone for new people coming in. And so the reason why we also have the self-governing model is so that it can grow in a decentralized way. So if we had the centralized top-down model and we wanted to build 100 villages, we would need 100 times the staff we would need for one village, and that gets expensive pretty fast. But if you go with the self-governing model, then you could set up hundreds of them in a decentralized fashion to the point where the villages will run themselves, and you'd only have to intervene if somehow a village went way off track or something. But that it would be better than not, I think. On average, they would all work out, but there would probably be a few that you would have to adjust. But
how can Bellingham residents and all of that help with the progression of maybe a second village or help in any way with HomesNOW?
If there's land available, so if someone has land they want to help us buy or lease, or that they have land they want to lease, and they're willing to work on this problem with us, we would appreciate that. And we need a site. We need at least 1/4 of an acre, but more is better than that. That's the minimum. And it has to have electric and water. And we don't need sewer, but that would be nice. And also we're also trying to save money to build the village, and also to buy the land. If we could ever just get a massive amount of donations, we would just buy the land. But in the absence of that, anyone who owns land that's in the city limits on a bus line and wants to help, we would really need that. And then also any of the local governments. If the city wants to help us set up a second site, we're open to that. If the county wants us to set up a site, we'll do that. And usually the hard thing to express to people too is that our donations scale up and down based on what we're doing. So if we are suddenly building stuff and you see the nails going into the wood in video form and crap like that, suddenly we get like a lot of donations. If we're just like, hey, we're fine, but we're trying to raise money to build tiny homes soon, zero, right? And so as soon as you start doing it, the dam breaks and people donate. But if you're at the point where you need it before you can start, it doesn't happen. And so that's basically been our conundrum of we don't have as much buffer as we'd like, but at the same time, we've been able to do everything we set out to do. So that is good as well.
What about people who really don't have land or anything? How can they help who have little resources kind of?
Yeah, if people are kind of more on the middle income end of the scale, they can always donate and donate money, and we'll use it where it's needed. If people want to volunteer their time rather than their money, that's great too.
What about during COVID?
During COVID, that's kind of been put on hold. There's other ways to help, though. There's people that can contact businesses who want to donate. There's people that can spread the word online. If something good is happening, they can spread it around. And we like to provide some good news going on sometimes rather than all negative, And so that's why we try to focus on progress. Hey, the situation sucks, but we made progress, and that's basically our angle.
I like that. Let me So, do you know of anyone else that works closely with caring for displacement people that I could possibly talk to as well?
Let me think. Yeah, displacement of people. I'm not really sure. Other than our vice chair Marcus, I would have. He's the one that is more out there. Outreach and stuff. I'm more of the paperwork guy. He actually goes out and finds people on the streets and helps more on that side. And so
that'd be awesome.
Yeah. And so I think he would be good to talk to as well. As for other organizations, I'm not so sure. I know there's another new nonprofit in town. They're called Road to Home. They are former HomesNOW volunteers, or some of them are still current HomesNOW volunteers. They have a different mission. Their mission is to help people find housing through community mentors. So they might they might have some experience as well, speaking to various individuals that have been displaced, since they are supposed to be the ones finding people connections for housing and stuff, kind of like the Opportunity Council. We at HomesNOW, it doesn't do that side as much. We more just provide the housing and the infrastructure and the foundation for stability.
Okay.
Keeping it simple, basically.
Foundation for stability. That was good. Marcus, is his email online?
His email is online, yeah, but let me get it for you. One sec.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'll get it for you.
And then also, I was wondering if you'd have any photos of the village during this time.
Yeah, yeah, I do.
I would love those. That would be amazing.
Okay, I'll send them to you.
Those.
But here is his email in the chat.
Ooh, awesome. Perfect. Thank you. And yeah, feel free. I don't need them right now. So.
Yeah, we have them though, so I'll just send them right away.
Oh, awesome. Let's see. Open computers. I think I just have a few more, and then I'll let you go.
Cool.
So, is there any like other recent news or updates from Homes Now that you're wanting to share with people in Bellingham?
The
Besides like the new kitchen and
most latest news is that we're trying to save up to set up a second village,
yeah.
and we are going to be building tiny homes from June until September because a gracious business owner has allowed us to use his warehouse, and it's big enough to have a few tiny homes in it. So that is very helpful. And so what I'm saying is there's lots of stuff like that lots of businesses can do to help us and can help the community in general, and as well as individuals. So, people, if you have a resource, let it help or like let us help you use it, right? And so it's that's all I would really have to say. And we're moving forward. It's a little bit more of a challenge. We're having to figure out fundraising a little bit different because we our fundraising strategy was going to be like set up benefit concerts, go to set up like events at breweries, go to the farmers market and set up a table. There was all these, there was all these like go to festivals and but that's not going to work anymore. So we're trying a couple different things, and so we're going to do grant writing, or I'm going to start wearing that hat soon, and we're also going to try to do something smaller, but something like where you do maybe a 50-50 raffle, or maybe you do a where you build little tiny homes, like little birdhouses, and put them in gas stations for people to donate in.
That's
so
cute.
There's a lot of little things we can do, and so we're basically exploring all options, and we always need more help in that regard. Fundraising is probably one of our weakest areas, but at the same time, we have always made enough to keep our operations afloat like we want. The only thing that we would like to do is we'd like to just do a lot more than what we have been able to do. And we have a good model. It's very cost effective, but we definitely need to work on our fundraising as well to reach that level. And our style of fundraising is different now because Jim was a real go-getter as far as getting people, pulling the heartstrings and getting the donations. We kind of, now with the current leadership of Homes Now, we're more like we're just doing the work and not like showing it off as much. And so that's not as conducive to fundraising. But I'm not saying we should do what was done before. I'm just saying that we have to come up with a different strategy for fundraising, and especially with the virus. We're thinking about it, and we'll come up with it. And we're not worried about the long term. We're just concerned about short term concerns that will get ironed out.
Okay. So you're kind of just taking it day by day.
Yep, and we are doing okay. So.
I like that. So do you have any like last words about like saying anything about the housing crisis during this pandemic? Just kind of trying to get a bit better understanding of just like homelessness during this pandemic.
I would just say the time is now to get people housed. I mean, they house people when they're afraid that they might get other people sick, but they can't house them normally, right? So I think that there's a lot that can be done. I think that homelessness is an easy issue to solve. You house people. Sure, people will have their own problems like they always do, but housed people have exactly those same problems too. And so we're talking about 4 walls and a roof with some insulation and electricity and water. It's not rocket science. It's not very expensive in terms of material costs to provide that. The thing that kind of stands in the way is the market more than anything. Like because housing is a really big market, and so it's almost like whether you're a landlord, whether you're a government, it's like a piggy bank. Like if people have to pay higher property taxes, that's a piggy bank for the city. If you're a landlord, the renters are your piggy bank, and the rent going up makes your piggy bank bigger. But if you talk about the cost of the actual housing itself to provide that for people, it's not very expensive, and the time is now, and things can happen quicker than you think if it's actually a goal. What I've seen over the last years is excuses. That's what I would call it. Like, oh yeah, people are, oh, this person's not housed. Oh, it's because they're a drug addict. Oh, this person's not housed. It's because they made bad decisions. Oh, this person's not housed. It's because they won't get a job. Oh, this person's not housed. It's because they can't manage their money. And sure, any of those things could be true, but it's not true in a lot of cases that's the reason why someone lost their housing. In fact, some of the stereotypes around homelessness are things that happen once they're homeless. So I know, for example, if I was homeless, I'd be doing a lot more drugs and alcohol just to numb the day-to-day life of having to deal with that and not seeing a way out or whatever. And so a lot of times when people are in a stable environment, it's easy for people to get their shit together compared to when you're literally on the concrete or whatever. And so this is a solvable problem. It's easy to solve if it's a goal to solve. And
I've noticed you've been saying a lot, if I were in this situation. Is that how like Homes Now looks at homelessness? More like if I were in this situation, this is how I
Yeah, it goes back to what I was saying about where the residents are treated as equal to the board members as much as possible, or I try to facilitate that as much as possible. And so, yeah, the idea is we're treating them like we would want to be treated in the same situation. And it could happen to any one of you. It could happen to you. It could happen to me. And it is. People think it can't happen to them, but it can. And
this will show it. COVID will show it.
Yeah, and so when it does happen, I just want people to be treated with respect and not degraded just because they lack a dwelling.
Okay, I think that's all I have for you. It'd be amazing to get those photos.
I'll get them for you.
Perfect. That'd be awesome.
Okay.
Okay, well, it's nice talking to you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for meeting with me.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Bye.